Tonight, help is on the way. Donald Trump's pledge to protesters in Iran, with up to 2,000 people feared dead. The US president urges protesters to stay on the streets and warns those responsible for the senseless killings will pay a big price. This is the 26-year-old man who will be executed tomorrow after demonstrating against his government. Activists say Irfan Soltani has had no access to his lawyers. He'll speak to his family one last time before being killed. Coming up, how Starlink is helping to defy the internet blackout by making the subscription free. I hear from the entrepreneur who first brought the satellite service to Iran. The US imposes tariffs on Iran's trading partners, but can China and India really influence Tehran's leaders? And how can America help those brave enough to defy the regime? We'll assess Washington's options coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. Donald Trump coined a new acronym today, MIGA. Make Iran Great Again. And he urged Iranians to take over their institutions, promising that help is on the way. Things feel different today, more urgent. My sources tell me US action could come overnight. For 4 days, Iran's leaders have imposed an internet blackout. Pictures and information has been limited, but we now know the number of deaths could be in the thousands. We've heard the accounts of unarmed protesters being shot. And so has the US president. He's expected to meet his national security advisor and his secretary of war this evening, most likely to make his final decision. Have a listen.
I say, make Iran great again. You know, it was a great country until these monsters came in and took it over.
So could we see decisive action in the next few hours? And if so, how will Iran respond? Lots to discuss tonight. Let's get started with this report from our international correspondent, Alex Rossi.
There is only a trickle of images coming out of Iran, but what they show is increasingly brutal. In this video, security forces opened fire on unarmed civilians. It's feared thousands may have been killed. Among the dead is Yassin Mizai. He was 31 years old, a student living in Italy, who'd returned to Iran in the new year. His cousin, who's in Turkey, told us the situation is desperate.
I've not slept for an hour since hearing about Yassin. Many people have died. The state does not want to talk about it, and we do not have access to that information, but at least 5 people have been killed in our neighbourhood in Kermanshah. There are many others, but because there's no internet, we can't get that accurate information.
The regime is now deploying the full machinery of repression. 26-year-old Irfan Soltani was detained 6 days ago. He's now been tried and sentenced to death. He's expected to be executed within hours.
Torture, detentions, killings on the streets, very serious injuries, and then waves of execution. And we see similar trends, but in a way on a very different scale, on a much more expensive scale than what we have seen in the past.
And there are new images from the Karazak mortuary in Tehran. Rows of bodies laid out on the floor. This footage was filmed on January the 9th, but it's only been uploaded now because of an ongoing internet blackout. Activists say these people were killed by the security services. The images are too graphic to broadcast, but many of the victims appear to have gunshot wounds. Understanding where these protests are heading is increasingly difficult. The internet is blocked, and even Elon Musk's Starlink system is being jammed. Iran's leaders do not want the world to see what is happening. God bless the US. The United States senses this may be a decisive moment.
And all I say to them is help is on its way. You saw that I put tariffs on anybody doing business with Iran. And I say, make Iran great again. You know, it was a great country until these monsters came in and took it over.
Washington is now weighing its options, including the possibility of military strikes. But inside Iran, the regime is not backing down.
We are prepared for any eventuality. If they want to try the military confrontation that they tried once and failed, again, we are ready. In fact, since the last war, we are even more ready. If they want to try other options, we're also ready. Whatever option they choose, we are ready.
Despite the violent suppression, Iran's clerics are facing the most serious threat to their rule in decades. The coming hours and days will be critical. Alex Rossi, Sky News.
Well, let's bring in our James Matthews, who joins us live from Washington. James, just in the last few days, we keep hearing that all options are on the table for President Trump. We saw his statement there on X, where he says, keep protesting, help is on the way. And we now understand he's going to be meeting with Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth to sort of explore all of those options, I guess.
That's right, yeah. And, you know, there are several options on the table, Yalda. Military action clearly front and centre, based on recent history. This is a president who's shown himself prepared to pull the trigger, both, of course, in Iran and more recently in Venezuela. Trump's heading home now from Detroit, where he gave that economic speech. His vice president is getting ready to chair a meeting of principals of the National Security Council. It's unclear whether Trump will dial into that on Air Force One or be briefed after the fact. That phrase, help, it's on its way, Yalda, I suppose it could mean a number of things, including a military strike, yes, but also actions short of that, cyber attacks potentially, an increase in economic sanctions. I think what Trump certainly has done is to tighten the screw on the diplomacy of it all. And he's dealing, of course, with an Iran that is weaker militarily than it has been, you know, following the 12-day war with Israel a few months ago, weaker than it has been for more than 20 years, and of course a regime under pressure from its very own streets. Trump said in that speech that he gave in Michigan that he liked flawless. He was referring to the operation in Venezuela. His difficulty is that Iran is no Venezuela, and flawless won't be so easy. Intervention in Iran, it presents the potential for instability in that country and, of course, beyond. It's one thing for Trump to position himself as a champion of democracy in Iran, but it's another to engage in a process that would lead the people to that democracy in the long term. As he heads back to Washington, D.C., Vance is chairing this meeting. You have to think that cool heads will be wary of an action that's too impulsive. The president was asked by a journalist actually in Detroit, what did you mean by this phrase, help, it's on his way? His answer was, you're going to have to figure that one out. So is he, Yalda, very carefully.
Yeah, indeed. James, thank you, as always. Well, let's bring in Irina Muradi from the Hangar Organization for Human Rights, an independent Kurdish group monitoring human rights violations in Iran. Thank you very much, Ms. Muradi, for joining us here on the programme. You know, yesterday I was covering the story, and although I was speaking to people monitoring the situation on the ground from human rights groups, they were saying they were being conservative when they were saying numbers were around the 650 mark. Today, even the Iranian authorities themselves have acknowledged that it's several thousand.
Yes, it's the same case with us. We are really careful with numbers simply because we so far we have this communication restriction, and we can verify and identify every single case. But in Hangar, we know that at least more than 2,050 people have been killed by the security forces. We so far have been able to identify and verify only 80 of them. We know that the process is slowing down because of the internet shutdown. But we know that the scale of violence and the scale of the crime is much bigger than what we currently been able to confirm and identify.
Yeah, and from some of the material that's coming out, and again, some of the material is delayed because of the issues around internet shutdown and Starlink and when people can turn the Starlink on and off. So, you know, the material coming out could be a few days old, but we are seeing and hearing that live ammunition is being used across the board, right across the country.
Yes, that's totally true. We have documented using of live ammunition in multiple cities, including Kermanshah, Ilam, Tehran, Islamshah, and other cities, Mashhad, Shiraz. We know that this time the government crossed every line and they used live ammunition against the protesters. Now we received some latest update from the ground that they deployed snipers even in residential areas to attack protesters. So this is totally true.
And we understand that more than 16,780 protesters have been arrested during the unrest, but we're getting reports of a 26-year-old man who's now facing execution tomorrow.
Yes, that's true. The number of detainees are 1,000. We don't really have the exact number, but we know that there are as young as 15 years old, for example, among them. And with the case of Irfan Sultani, this is the first and single case so far we could reach and that he received a death penalty for accusing him for being part of the protest. And he will be, according to the authorities who informed the family, he will be executed tomorrow. And this is the quickest, one of the quickest judicial case we have seen in Iran. It's less than a week and he already got execution sentence, and the family has been informed about this.
I guess with these execution cases, it's also a matter of using these cases as an example for others to say that could happen to them. We've seen that happen during 2022, 2019 in other protests as well.
It's totally right. It's not a single isolated case. It's a pattern we have seen before. And it seems that the Islamic Republic of Iran is trying to send out a clear message to the world, but also to the protesters and people inside Iran that they have no boundaries in the use of violence and brutality against whoever is protesting against the government. So you're right in that sense.
Irina Muradi, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
So where might the US strike in Iran if Trump gives the go-ahead? Our security and defence analyst, Professor Michael Clark, has been assessing the president's options.
As the Iranian crisis goes on, the White House is itching to take some sort of action, but we don't really know what sort of action they may be considering. There are a number of options, of course. The non-kinetic options, the peaceful options, include more sanctions, using tariffs to try to isolate the government in Tehran, which is already looks as if it's taking place, and the idea of cyber attacks, perhaps, on the Guard, the Revolutionary Guard, who are actually conducting the oppression of the protesters out in the streets of many, many cities. Beyond that, of course, there are the military options. And if we think about military strikes, there are three types of target that would make a certain amount of sense to the United States. One type of target might be the nuclear facilities of Iran. There are plenty of them. There are many of them that the United States would still like to attack, and so would the Israelis. The problem with that is that it wouldn't actually help the protesters very much, and it would be an attack on some background elements of Iran, which might be quite counterproductive. A second set of targets might be the Revolutionary Guard headquarters and the way in which they operate in the major cities. But the problem is they do operate in the major cities like Shiraz and Isfahan and Mashhad and Tehran. And so attacking their facilities almost certainly would cause civilian casualties, and that too might be counterproductive. A third sort of target might be the oil and gas infrastructure of Iran. And this would have an immediate effect, particularly in areas like Hag Island and Bandar Abbas. The South Pars gas field is the biggest single gas field in the world. It's shared with Qatar. Hitting the gas field would be a very foolish thing to do, but hitting the transmission of Iranian gas from the field to the inland areas, to places like Bashir, that might have a very immediate economic effect on the government in Tehran. Ultimately, of course, it would affect the people of Tehran. It would affect the economy pretty directly, but it would affect the government in Tehran even more directly, and that might be a tempting set of targets for the United States. Ultimately, of course, all of this is about whether the outbreak of disorder, and that's our current map of how big the disorder is across Iran, whether that outbreak of disorder is better helped by military action or by non-military action. We're going to find out the answer that the White House comes up with quite soon.
That's Professor Michael Clark there. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme, the man who brought Starlink to Iran tells me how Elon Musk's satellite internet service is breaking through the communications blackout for free. What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Iran's security forces have gone to extraordinary lengths to stop protesters communicating with each other and the outside world. Many Iranians turned to Elon Musk's satellite internet service, Starlink, and in response, the government has been working to jam that too, even searching homes for Starlink terminals. Iranian-American entrepreneur Shervin Peshawar first set up Starlink in Iran. He told me that as the protests escalated, the service was made free to thousands of people trying to get news to the outside world. He gave me his take on what's happening inside the country.
I think we were in a historic, 24, 48-hour period of time. The time to act is now. The Iranian people have shown unbelievable courage. They are the brave hearts of our time, and they are laying down their lives, spilling their blood for their freedom. They've been living in an open-air prison for 47 years, and they've had enough. President Trump's courageous call of support to the Iranian people had a major impact. The millions of people are calling for the return of Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. The time to act and recognize Reza Pahlavi as not the recommended choice, but the declared choice of the people. His name is in the streets. He's called for people to come at 8 p.m. on different nights. And they have responded, they have come. Their courage is inspiring the whole world. And now this Islamic regime, this criminal organization, terrorist organization has taken over Iran for 47 years, is using the military to mow down these young people, these defenseless young people who are fighting for their freedom. And so this is a moral question of our time. We've inspired them to come in the streets. They're being mowed down. Families are being torn apart. You see these images of mothers hugging their children in the body bags. The numbers are in the thousands, whether it's 5,000, 10,000. They're using the military and military guns to mow down defenseless young people. So whether it's the next 24 hours or 48 hours, this moment in time that doesn't come often. This is a revolution. This is not protests. People are showing the world unbelievable courage, and it's now time for the leaders of the world to show the same kind of courage and to act. It's been critical to get Starlink in there as well, and now that's been blocked as predicted.
Shervin, you have played a critical role in supplying the Iranian people with these Starlinks. You lobbied Elon Musk. You got the Starlink to the country back in 2022. Just talk us through the history, the background behind that, why you felt it was important at the time. And you refer to Starlink as a freedom tool. Just talk us through the impact that it has had.
Absolutely. The history goes back to 2010 during the first wave of the Green Revolution and the revolutions in Egypt and across North Africa and Libya. I had a dinner with the Secretary of State at the time, along with Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, and Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google at the time. And I said this idea, and the line that I said was that the last bastion of dictatorship is the router. Every time a revolution like this begins, dictators and tyrants block the internet, they block the router. And so, it's basically, a time where, the solution is to use satellites to bring internet to people when dictators try to stop them from recording the violent acts that's happening to them and telling the truth and showing their courage to the world. So I flew into Benghazi at that time, 2 weeks before Gaddafi was killed. I went to Tahrir Square, met with the protesters. In East Libya, there was a cellular network connected to satellites that was able to use to fight for their freedom. And then Elon Musk, who's an old friend, and I was an investor in SpaceX a long time ago. And when he started to create Starlinks, I knew that that was the solution.
Just talk us through that. Do you think that Elon Musk will intervene, will step in and try and do something because it does feel like a race between these jammers, the technology there, and Starlink?
Well, I mean, in Ukraine, the Russians were jamming over and over again, and the brilliant engineers at SpaceX were able to, figure out how to get around that. So Ukraine was really like an incubator for developing these solutions and algorithms to get around these military jamming technologies. So that's actually been very helpful in Iran. And then just this last week, the Starlinks were activated and also became free for people to connect. Used to have to pay a subscription, which not a lot of people have the money for. So I was helping fund that in the past, but for it to be free is a major thing. So there's many things that they are doing, and that's. I think the people that have been involved in these things deserve a lot of credit. That's including Elon and even President Trump supporting and acting on it and saying let's do more.
And as you say, we are, despite the Starlink, we are seeing these jammers impacting the kind of flow of information, the images that we're seeing coming out. And yet those who are managing to work around it are releasing these images that we're seeing, the images of body bags, for example, the people out on the streets as well. How are they managing to do that? Just talk us through the process of working around, other than the engineers who are helping them. I mean, are these Starlink routers in certain homes, and are they working in a sort of clandestine way and only sending it out to people that they trust?
Yeah, and there's instructions that have gone out about how to obviously hide the Starlinks. That's been from the beginning, but also recently in terms of like how to get around the jamming but they're hunting down the Starlinks now. They're going door to door, and it reminds you that these are occupiers. Some of the mercenaries that are being used aren't even Iranian. And so this is an occupied nation. These Iranian people are living in an open air prison, 92 million of them. And if we're so close to freedom, that if courageous action happens and the promises that were made to the Iranian people that we would have their backs if there was violence. And now there's violence. The military is murdering thousands of young Iranians. They're hanging a young man that was in prison just last week. They're speeding through these trials. It's 1979 again. It's the same thing. My father, he was also a journalist like yourself in radio and television for the Shah. And he put out the foreign language broadcast to tell people instructions how to get out. Back then, it wasn't Starlinks. It was tape cassettes that were being spread around. Now we have the ability to have open communications.
That was Iranian-American entrepreneur Shervin Peshawar, who first helped set up Starlink in Iran. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim, next up on the programme, continuing our coverage of Iran as its leaders, protesters and the world wait for threatened action by the US.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Well, it's been several days since we've been able to speak to people inside Iran. So what is the mood like there now that Donald Trump is promising that help is coming? Abbas Aslani is a senior research fellow at the Center for Middle East Strategic Studies. He joins me live now from Tehran. Thank you very much, Mr. Aslani, for joining us here on the programme. You know, for the last few days, we've been quite cautious about the death toll. We've said it's been roughly somewhere between 500 and 650. But even today, the regime itself has come out and said it could be several thousand. Could you just talk us through what you're seeing and hearing on the ground in Tehran?
Yalda, as we speak, there are no major protests ongoing in the country, but the discussions are that there might be significant number of casualties during the protests from the both sides, including from the security forces as well as those on the protesters' side. There is no, let's say, a specific or precise number. It seems that investigations are ongoing, but in the meantime, the eyes are on, let's say, the threat coming from the U.S. side, President Trump making remarks regarding Iran, and whether there will be a foreign aggression against the country or not, that's yet at the moment a question.
We want to get to that in a moment, Mr. Aslani, but I do want to talk about the piles of body bags that we've been seeing outside of hospitals, piled up. Some of these human rights groups that are monitoring the situation inside Iran say that, you know, that live ammunition is being used on these demonstrators. Could you talk us through that point about the live ammunition?
Yalda, you know, the protests originated from the Grand Bazaar here in the capital city, Tehran, and in a number of other towns and cities. And it was mostly peaceful at that moment when it focused on the economic demands. But the initial phase was somehow fizzling out. But the second shock provoked a new round of, let's say, protests. And there were some, let's say, announcements coming from the son of the previous Shah of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, who called people to come to the streets, and he, this was kind of, let's say, inciting for more violence. He asked people to, let's say, take over the public buildings.
Just on the point of the live ammunition that's being used on the protesters, could you confirm that? Because the footage that we're seeing coming out, because of course there isn't much footage coming out. There's an internet blackout, although you have connectivity, as does the Supreme Leader. But for the rest of the population, the rest of the 90 million people inside Iran, there is no connectivity. When we are getting some kind of material coming out, we're seeing body bags, we're seeing live ammunition being used against people in the street. We're hearing reports, and we've covered reports here on Sky News as well, of 18-year-olds, teenagers who are being killed by the security forces.
Yalda, the protests were happening mostly in a peaceful manner, but there were some, let's say, protesters who engaged in, let's say, armed attack against the security forces. They tried to attack public buildings or mosques. It's like, setting fire on churches. And we have been hearing that even some security forces have been beheaded or burnt alive, or some medical staff. That's why we were seeing also the response from the security forces, which resulted in a high number of casualties on both sides. And that is what was not, let's say, meant or sought by the Iranian security forces or the government. As I was saying, the initial phase was more peaceful, but in the later stage, which was, the economic demands or protests turned into more,
but live ammunition is being used against unarmed protesters.
But the Iranian security forces initially they didn't use live ammunitions, but they faced armed attack on the security forces, on public buildings being set on fire, or let's say even some horrific scenes happening. They were forced to react. However, it is not good to see that even those protesters are being killed, but we are also hearing from the external, let's say, officials like the American officials or like Reza Pahlavi calling for those kind of, let's say, violent clashes between security forces and the protests, which resulted in this situation. And the security forces had no choice but to respond to those who were setting fire on those, let's say, even private properties.
So using live ammunition then on unarmed protesters. Can I ask Mr. Aslani about 26-year-old who is being executed tomorrow? His case has been fast-tracked in the last week. He doesn't have access to his lawyers, and it's believed that he will face execution tomorrow.
There have been real protesters, people coming to the streets, chanting slogans against the situation and the problems they have had in their lives. But among them, there have been also cases that the Iranian government has been accusing of, let's say, committing riot and unrest, or some of them have been accused of having linked to foreign, let's say, agencies or, let's say, governments. And so this has made the situation very difficult. And this violence also sidelines the main protests, those masses who have been protesting against the situation to be sidelined and not to be heard well. And this is the problem that many people might be unhappy with the situation, but they do not get the chance to somehow speak out and to protest, because this violence, somehow sidelines them in the longer run.
So how is the regime now dealing with the idea of Donald Trump having military options on the table? Because he warned very clearly that if live ammunition is used against protesters or they are killed, that he would step in. He said that they were ready and loaded. What does the Iranian government, the authorities, think will happen now?
Well, the Iranian government is considering this scenario very seriously, and they think that this threat is serious, and they are prepared to somehow retaliate against any kind of, let's say, attacks against the country. But it seems that, the Trump administration is using this as a kind of pretext in order to initiate another round of attacks against the country, in order to target the military infrastructure, the security let's say, establishment in the country, in order to weaken Iran. And that's why we have been hearing about significant number of casualties. Some of those numbers have been exaggerated. And it seems that it wants to provoke a kind of attack against the country. But also the quality of the impact such kind of, aggression can have in the country is also the matter of question. Some are asking whether this could, let's say, trigger another rally around the flag effect, which happened during the 12-day war. For sure, some, let's say, part of, protesters who have been seeking a violent, let's say, a protest against the government, they might welcome it, but the masses and the majority of the people will not welcome a chaos or unrest, because they think that any foreign aggression or attack can create a, let's say, situation whereby there could be a civil war. And it can also, there is no clear picture that the day after how it will seem, and it seems somehow blank or grim. And they are afraid that the day after Israel will attack, different infrastructure in the country, something which has happened in Syria or other countries in the region. And that's why the masses or the average citizens, they do not want to somehow see a foreign aggression coming.
Yeah, we'll have to see, because, of course, as you say, I mean, there are at least 2,000 people who've been reported dead, but we aren't able to access proper information from inside the country because, unlike yourself, the rest of the country don't have access to the internet, and they are relying occasionally on Starlink. Mr. Abbas Aslani, thank you very much for your time. OK, let's just show you these live images at St Andrews Air Base as Donald Trump returns to Washington after that event in Detroit. We were hearing him in the last hour or so. He's expected to meet his national security advisor and the Secretary of Defense to discuss the options on the table when it comes to Iran. And in the last few days, we've heard Donald Trump talk about military options on the table. He raised diplomatic options as well, although today he put out a statement on X saying that he would no longer be speaking to the Iranian authorities given the high death toll across the country following these protests. But you're looking at these live images coming in from St Andrews Air Base, where President Donald Trump has just arrived after that rally in Detroit, where he briefly talked about Iran as well. But we are expecting him to meet with his national security advisor and Secretary of War to discuss the options when it comes to Iran. We're going to look now at President Trump's announcement of 25% US tariffs for any country doing business with Iran. It was a move swiftly criticised by China. Here's why. Well, of the 100 or so countries who trade with Iran, China is the biggest importer. They brought in more than $4 billion worth of goods from Iran in 2024. Then there's the wider trade war between the US and China, which paused with a truce in November. The current US tariff on Chinese imports is 47.5%. That would reach 72.5% if the extra 25% is added. But India and China, who also trade with Iran, would be hit hardest by the new tariffs because of their reliance on exports to America. So could they actually influence what's happened next in Iran? And is China likely to retaliate? Our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith has this analysis from Beijing.
I think China is really holding fire for the time being because I think it, along with many others around the world, are just trying to figure out exactly what this new tariff might mean, exactly how it might be applied and who it might be applied to, and crucially, whether China might have some sort of exemption because of a much broader trade deal that exists between China and the United States. Look, theoretically, of course, China should be first in line for this sort of tax. It is Iran's biggest trading partner. Experts say it buys at least 80%, perhaps even as much as 90% of Iran's shipped oil. The exact figures are a little unclear because China doesn't publish them. And it's really one of just a few countries that will continue to do business with Iran. It has Chinese companies finance Iranian infrastructure and construction and so on. So look, in theory, of course, China should be targeted by this tax if it's going to be applied to everyone who, quote, does business with Iran. But the crucial context is a broader deal that exists between China and the US. Remember, last year was so characterised by this very damaging tit-for-tat trade war between the two countries. At the height of that, tariffs on Chinese goods being sold to the US were as high as 145%. And the whole episode was really damaging to both economies, really. If the US were to slap an additional 25% tax on China today and in the coming days, be in absolutely no doubt China would retaliate. And it would likely retaliate by reneging on some of those things that Donald Trump got out of that agreement that were very, very important to him. So we have to ask ourselves really whether that's an action Trump will want to take and whether he's willing to put that long, hard-fought deal, and it took many months to negotiate, in jeopardy.
So what can European leaders do about all of this? Honestly, not much. The president of the EU Commission has promised swift sanctions on the Iranian authorities responsible for the repression of anti-government protests. And today, Germany's chancellor suggested the Iranian regime was in its final days and weeks. Here in the UK, the Iranian ambassador was summoned to the Foreign Office for a meeting that lasted just under 20 minutes. We don't know what was said, but it's likely to have been a robust exchange based on what the Foreign Secretary told the Commons earlier. Have a listen.
The United Kingdom condemns in the strongest of terms the horrendous and brutal killing of Iranian protesters, and we demand that the Iranian authorities respect the fundamental rights and freedoms of their citizens. And today, as the further reports have come through, The Minister for the Middle East at my instruction has summoned the Iranian ambassador to underline the gravity of this moment and to call Iran to answer for the horrific reports that we are hearing.
That was the Foreign Secretary there. Well, the Iranian regime has been leaning on every tried and tested method to suppress mass protests over the past 2 weeks. So far, it hasn't yet passed a tipping point. But what would this look like? I spoke to international crisis groups Ali Vaiz and began with the rising numbers of deaths emerging from the country.
The Iranian regime itself has admitted that around 2,000 to 3,000 people have been killed. Some other groups are putting the numbers much higher. Regardless of how many the exact number is, and we have to wait for the dust to settle to get a better sense, this is without precedent. Iran massacred a group of political prisoners in the 1980s. The number was probably somewhere around 5,000 to 8,000. But since then, we have never seen peaceful protests ending in a bloodbath in the way that they have this time around.
What do you think the regime is potentially thinking right now? On the one hand, as you say, we're seeing this kind of bloodbath that the international community, despite the internet blackout, is getting some sense of what's going on. On the other hand, you've got the wild card, Donald Trump, saying to the protesters, help is on the way. What do you think that they're thinking tonight?
Well, first of all, it's a little too late, Yalda, to go to the rescue of Iranian protesters because I've been speaking to Western embassies in Iran in the past 24 hours, and almost everyone is telling me that the protests have died down significantly in the past 48 hours. And it's understandable because the regime brought down its iron fist in such a vociferous way that, it has had a chilling effect, without any doubt, on Iranian protesters. Now, part of the reason that I think the regime has done this quickly was because they anticipated that the U.S. could get involved, and they wanted to wrap up the protest movement before the U.S. Could move its military assets from the Caribbean back to the Middle East.
Do you feel now, if nothing is done, despite these threats by Donald Trump, it somehow legitimizes the actions of the regime?
Look, nothing legitimizes this degree of brutal violence against unarmed protesters. But the reality is that I think President Trump has already created a strategic dilemma for himself, meaning that if he doesn't take action, it will be, in his eyes and the eyes of his allies, a repeat of Obama's red line in Syria, and it would undermine his credibility. But if he does take action, as I said, first of all, it's already late, and second, it might have unintended consequences. If he takes limited action, it might not move the needle at all. If he takes an action that would break the needle, then he would end up with a violent chaos in Iran that might even produce a much bigger disaster than what we have seen in the past 2 weeks.
Ali, just help us understand. I mean, whether it's the 2009 demonstrations, 2019, 2022, or what we're seeing today, what we don't seem to see and what many rely on is defections from within, whether that's at the top, the middle, the bottom, the regular army refusing to shoot at the protesters or take the orders of the Revolutionary Guard or the Supreme Leader. But we don't see the kind of defection that we sometimes see in other places. Why do you think that the regime, even the reformists, close ranks in the way that they do?
It's a very good question, and I think it has multiple reasons. One is that the Islamic Republic is a republic of fear. It is a police state. So even high officials are spied upon and are very cautious and careful because at any moment you can fall from grace and you can lose everything you have. Second reason is that I think they don't see an exit ramp. They understand that they're all sitting in the same ship, and if this goes down, they will all go down with it. The West has never tried to incentivize defections in a way that elements within the system believe that there might be a future after the regime's collapse or transformation, in the same way that it happened in Venezuela, for example.
And Ali, how much does ideology play into it?
Well, look, this is a regime that is ideologically bankrupt after 46 years of using ideology and basically failing across the board economically, environmentally, socially, politically. It has, if you think about the two main policies of this regime, the axis of resistance, which was its network of partners and proxies in the region, has now been degraded significantly and has failed. Its economy of resistance, which was designed to circumvent U.S. sanctions and survive under U.S. sanctions, has also faltered. The only thing that has not changed is its resistance to change. And this is why the regime is at a deadlock. And a lot of people within the system understand it, but there is nothing that they can do about it. The Islamic Republic is good at suppressing protest. It is absolutely incapable of addressing the underlying causes of it.
That was Ali Vaez speaking to me a little earlier. Well, Donald Trump has just disembarked at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland as he returns to the White House. He was asked about Iran. Let's just have a listen in.
The White House now, we're going to look at the whole situation that's going on in Iran. It's really bad stuff. Minnesota is going to have to take care of itself for a little while. We have tremendous theft and fraud going on in that state because you have an incompetent governor, grossly incompetent governor, and a corrupt governor. But we'll straighten that out. But Iran is on my mind when I see the kind of death that is happening over there, we think. So we're going to get some accurate numbers. I'll have it in about 20 minutes. We'll get some accurate numbers as to what's happening with regard to the killing. The killing looks like it's significant, but we don't know yet for certain. I'll know within 20 minutes. So, and we'll act accordingly.
Donald Trump due to meet his national security advisor and his secretary of war. Let's go live to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who is at Downing Street for us. And I mean, John, we're seeing the US president talk about this momentum. And of course, we saw the Iranian ambassador here summoned and the foreign secretary talking about it in the Commons. But essentially, what more can the government here do? What can Europeans do?
Well, other European governments have taken similar action in calling in Iranian ambassadors around Europe. The Foreign Secretary also, who announced that it was Hamish Faulkner, the Middle East minister, who called in the ambassador, she said she'd spoken to Iran's foreign minister yesterday. We know that the Prime Minister has had talks with not only President Macron and Chancellor Merz of Germany in condemning what's happening in Iran, but the Prime Minister has had a few phone calls with Donald Trump in recent days. Now, in the Commons, Yvette Cooper was asked by a number of MPs, what did the President mean when he said help is on its way? Well, she didn't seem to know, really. There were calls from Liberal Democrats that the UK should not support any action taken by the Americans, and then from Reform UK saying that the UK should get involved. We heard from the veteran former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn saying regime change never works. But there was consensus between Labour and the Conservatives. The Cabinet obviously discussed it today. Prime Minister will be in the Commons tomorrow. Prime Minister's questions. We'll hear more from the Prime Minister tomorrow.
John, as always, thank you so much. Well, that's it from us. The news at 10 is up next. Good night.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.